Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. My name is Lane and today I'm going to talk to you guys about the Pokemon Timeline. So generally speaking, there are a few accepted time jumps within the Pokemon world that we are aware of, but other than that, this whole video is pretty much just going to be my opinion based off of the evidence that I found in games and evidence that I found other places. And if you disagree with me, talk about it in the comments. If you agree with me, talk about it in the comments, and let's go from there. So this is also going to be a very generalized timeline. So I'm going to group games together by the region. So the Kanto games as a whole are going to be Red, Blue, Green, Yellow, Fire Red, Leaf Green, Let's Go Pikachu, and Let's Go Eevee. So even though the events of those games happen differently, they still are all encompassing of the Kanto region. So the Kanto games are here, and then, yeah. Alright, so first I'm going to go ahead and address the tweet made back on May of 2014 by Toshinobu Matsumiya. So Toshinobu Matsumiya has worked on many of the mainstream Pokemon games, so when he tweeted this, it was taken pretty seriously. It shows that the Kanto games and the Hoenn games are meant to take place at around the same time, then followed by the Johto games, which take place at the same time as the Sinnoh games. This is followed by Black and White, which is followed by Black 2 and White 2, which do happen at the same time as the Kalos games. So in this tweet, it does not mention anything about the Alola, Galar, or Paldea regions because they didn't exist back in 2014. So I don't think that this tweet is entirely true though, so I'm going to go ahead and give my input on where I think things fall. Alright, so let's go ahead and get this started with the events of the Kanto games, that being Red, Blue, Green, Yellow, Fire Red, Leaf Green, and Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. So these games are followed directly by the events of the Johto region, that being Gold, Silver, Crystal, and Heart Gold, and Soul Silver. We are able to see this actually through a lot of different evidence in the game, biggest being that we're actually able to revisit the Kanto region in the post-game and see that characters have changed and grown, gotten different positions, and that the region itself has actually changed. Examples of people growing is that your rival in Generation 1, Blue, is now a gym leader, the former gym leader Koga is now an Elite Four member, and then of course we have the former Elite Four member Lance now becoming champion of the Indigo Plateau. There are several characters that are directly mentioned in the events of Gold, Silver, and Crystal, such as a man in the Violet City Pokemon Center stating that a former Team Rocket was actually broken up by a, quote, young kid. We also have the parents of the copycat girl in Saffron City mention that her Clefairy doll was given to her by a boy 3 years before. So that does give us our date of the Johto games taking place at around 3 years after the events of the Kanto games. Next, we have the events of the Hoenn games, that being Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. The Hoenn games are actually a little bit more tricky to place, with not much evidence to support anything from any of the previous games. However, in Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, we are able to meet Steven Stone, where he says, "Hi, my name is Steven, the champion of the Hoenn region. Have we met before? That's not possible. All the trainers I have battled seem to have that same look anyway, especially the ones who gave me tough battles." When he mentions previous trainers, it is assumed that he is referring to either Brandon or May when they defeated him in the actual Hoenn games, which would place this encounter that in the Johto region after the Hoenn games take place. Him referring to himself as the champion of the Hoenn region would imply that he is still champion, but I think this is just him referring to himself with the title still. He does appear in the Champions Tournament at a later point, so it's not out of the question for him to still refer to himself as a champion. I am going to place these games at the same time of the Kanto games though, based off of one thing, that being the existence of Deoxys. So for those of you who are aware, Deoxys is a mythical Pokemon introduced in the Generation 3 games by event only, that being in Fire Red, Leaf Green, and Emerald. So the only games that appears naturally in the story though is in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire as part of the Delta episode, as part of this meteorite shower coming in to hit the Earth. So this meteorite shower, I think, is a representation of the meteorite landing in the event on Birth Island, which would mean that these games actually happen at the same time in Fire Red and Leaf Green. So with these two events coinciding at the same time, I think that these games take place at the same time. We next move on to my favorite region, that being the Sinnoh region in the Sinnoh games of Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, and their remakes of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Now, according to the tweet, this game takes place at the same time as the Johto games, which is heavily hinted at by the opening sequence in Diamond Pearl and Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, in which it mentions an expedition's team failure to find the rumored Red Gyarados. The only region in which we can see a Red Gyarados is in the Johto games at the Lake of Rage. So, with the mention of this, it seems that this would happen at the same time. However, there is a pretty big inconsistency. There are quite a few characters that appear in both games, such as Jasmine, Professor Oak, Maylene, and Crasher Wake. These people cannot be in the same place at the same time, so one of these games has to happen for the other. With the mention of this Red Gyarados avoiding capture by the expedition team, I do believe that because it's avoiding capture, it's just not there. It's already been captured by the player character of the Johto games. This places the Sinnoh games directly after the Johto games. We next move on to our first adventure into Unova Region with the games of Black and White. Now, we don't have an exact date for these games, but we do know that they happen sometime after the events of Johto and Sinnoh due to information provided to us by a plasma grunt. The grunt says Team Galactic and Team Rocket drew too much attention to themselves, and that's why their plans were thwarted. Beyond that, we don't know too much other than that there is a reformed member of the Team Rocket living in Icarus City. He is believed to be the lone Team Rocket grunt who stole the machine part from the Kanto power plant. Once he moved here, he fell in love and started a family. The biggest insight into this time jump is that Caitlin of the Battle Castle in the Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and Platinum Battle Frontiers appears as an Elite Four member in the Unova region. She does reference her prior ability to battle and mentions the Battle Castle's presence in both Sinnoh and Johto. She is visibly older here, so with this, it does prove that Black and White belong here after the events of Sinnoh and Johto, with no really proven time frame on how far in between. One time jump that we are aware of, though, is the time jump between Black and White and Black 2 and White 2, our second journey to the Unova region. So we know that this game takes place 2 years after the events of Black and White. This is because characters have aged like Charon, Bianca, and Iris, and there are changes to the region, and there's a new champion and new gym leaders. We also see in Icarus City that there is a married couple that used to be members of Team Magma and Team Aqua, showing that forbidden love is possible. And this is gotta happen after the events of the Hoenn games for there to be reformed members of the evil teams. We get the exact time frame from several different NPCs, as well as a quote mentioning this time jump from N. On that day, 2 years ago, a certain trainer, an elder, taught me something. By accepting different ideas, and this world creates a different chemical reaction. So I met many Pokemon, and it goes on. So this securely places this game 2 years behind the original. Next, we have the events of the Kalos region, that being X and Y. Which, we know that these probably happened at the same time as Black 2 and White 2 due to a few different facts. A male Pokemon breeder in the Magenta Plaza Pokemon Center mentions Team Plasma, quote, making news a while back in the Unova region. This statement lets us know that this at least happens after the events of Black and White. A tourist eating outside of a cafe in Lumio City mentions having visited a cafe in Stridon City, which by this time, or by the events of Black 2 and White 2, have been fully renovated into a cafe from the gym. Finally, one of the items that the player may be asked to find during the Lost and Found job in the Hotel Richimise is a Bryson Man figure. The Bryson Man movie series is something that you as a player can be a part of at Pokestar Studio in Black 2 and White 2. So companies usually release toys when a movie is being released as promotional options, so it's not unheard of for all of this. So given all of these facts, it's pretty safe to assume that this happens at around the same time as Black 2 and White 2, but I'm going to place it directly after. Next, we have the events of the Alola games, that being Sun, Moon, Ultra Sun, and Ultra Moon. With these games being a celebration of the Pokemon's 20th anniversary, they brought back a lot of different characters and have aged them from their initial appearances. We have the original protagonist and rival, Red and Blue, Annabelle of the Battle Tower in Pokemon Emerald, Grimsley and Corliss of Black and White and Black 2 and White 2, as well as many other characters. Colress in the postgame of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon refers to the guestess of Rainbow Rocket not being the one that he knew. He also helps the Ultra Recon Squad by developing 2 devices, which are modified versions of the Colress machines for fusing and defusing Necrozma with Solgaleo and Lunala. When he later gives these devices, the Ensolarizer and Lunarizer, to the player on Mount Lanakila, he alludes to his earlier experiences regarding Pokemon Fusion, which he helped do for Kyurem and Gestis using the DNA splicers in Black 2 and White 2. We do know that in Porygon's Pokedex entries, it also talks about being developed 20 years ago, near the time of the events of Red, Blue, and Yellow, since it first appears here. When looking at the concept art for Grimly, it does state 2 years later, which could imply that these games take place 2 years after his latest appearance in Black 2 and White 2. When subtracting all these years from the known 20 years between Red, Blue, Yellow, and Sun, Moon, Ultra Sun, and Ultra Moon, we can deduct that there's about a 12-year difference between the Sinnoh games and Black and White as well. We next have the events of the Galar games, that being Sword, Shield, and the 2 expansion passes, that being the Isle of Armor and the Crown Tundra. Now, we know that these games happened sometime after the events of the Alola games, and this is strictly due to the presence of Type Null in the Galar region. Type Null was invented by Faber right before the events of Sun, Moon, and the Ultra games, and at the end of the game, there were only 3 in existence. At some point, the research notes were stolen and taken to the Galar region, and more were created, stated in the Pokédex entry for it in the Galar games. It's not known exactly how long has been between these 2 games, but we do know that it happens after. We next have one of my favorite Pokemon games, that being Legends Arceus.
Arceus?
Legends Arceus does take place before the events of the Sinnoh games, and we do know this due to the player from these games actually being sent back in time. We know this is in the past because the Sinnoh region has not yet been formed, with it still being referred to as the Hisui region, as well as modern Pokeballs not yet being invented. We know that this game takes place less than 500 years before the Sinnoh games due to the Pokedex entry for Spiritomb stating that it was sealed into the Odd Keystone at this point, and Spiritomb is freed at some point in the Legends Arceus game. So this places it less than 500 years before the events of the Sinnoh games. Lastly, we are going to discuss the most recent addition to the Pokemon main series games, that being Scarlet and Violet. I'm not going to cover the DLC just yet because they haven't come out yet, so nothing to talk about. We have next to no mention of any other games in this beyond this game. There is a mention of a book, in this book actually being the one that Sonia, the character from Sword and Shield, was working on writing and that you receive at the end of the game. Since this book talks about the events of Sword and Shield, we can conclude that this happens towards the end of the timeline after the events of Sword and Shield. Alright, so that is going to do it for this video, but if you guys did enjoy it, a lot of arm movements. If you guys did enjoy it, go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, follow. I've also thought about trying to do this for like these side series games, so like the Ranger series, the Mystery Dungeon series, the Coliseum series, and seeing if I can try to find some evidence that would place them in this main series timeline as well, because I think that that'd be really cool with them all connecting. So if you guys would like to see that, please comment, let me know, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a great one!